When I collapsed at work, the doctors called my parents. They never showed up. But as I lay in that hospital bed, my sister sent me a photo. It was the whole family smiling at a barbecue. Across the bottom she wrote, "Family day without the chaos." That was the moment something in me cracked in a way I couldn't glue back together. Stay with me as I tell you what really happened, and if my story reaches your heart, I'd appreciate you sticking around and showing some support. It means more than you know. I remember blinking up at the hospital ceiling, everything spinning slightly, the 4 cold in my arm. The nurse kept asking if I had someone to call. I lied and said yes, even though deep down I already knew no one was coming. When the doctor told me I had collapsed from stress, anemia, and months of overworking, I didn't even feel surprised. I had been holding my family together for years. Of course, something in my body finally gave out. But nothing prepared me for that photo. My phone buzzed, and for a second I thought maybe my sister Reese was checking on me. Instead, I saw my family gathered around a grill, plates stacked with food, drinks in their hands, laughing like the world was perfect. And then her message under it, "Family day, without the chaos." The chaos was me. Me, the one who paid most of their bills, who drove Reese to every school event, who stayed up nights fixing the problems they created. In that moment, my chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with anemia. It was the kind of hurt that comes only when the people you love show you exactly how replaceable you are to them. I tried calling my mom anyway. Straight to voicemail. I tried my dad. He declined the call. Reese left my text on read. I stared at the screen until it blurred. I hadn't felt that small since I was a kid holding my breath during my father's angry outbursts. And even then, I still believed they cared in their own messy way. Lying there, I thought about all the years I had carried them. My mom's overdue bills, my dad's constant financial mistakes, Reese's drama. I had skipped vacations, worked double shifts, and pretended I wasn't exhausted. I told myself it was what family did. But if family did that, what was I to them? When the nurse asked again if someone was coming, I finally said no. My voice shook, but it also felt strangely freeing. For the first time, I wasn't covering for them. I wasn't pretending. I looked at that photo one more time, the smiling faces, the sunlight on the picnic table, the empty spot where I should have been. Except they never saved me a spot at all. Right then, something inside me shifted. I didn't feel weak anymore. I felt awake. Something new was growing in the place where the guilt used to live. And that was the beginning of everything that came next. Mara grew up in a small, quiet town in rural Pennsylvania, where the roads were cracked, the neighbors knew everyone's business, and her house always felt strangely heavy, as if the walls themselves were tired. She learned early that being the oldest daughter meant being the one who carried everything. While other kids her age played outside or complained about chores, Mara was learning how to calm her father's temper when he came home irritated, how to stretch her mother's grocery money, and how to help little Reese finish homework so the teachers wouldn't call home again. She remembered being 9 years old, standing on a chair to wash dishes because her mom was too overwhelmed. Even though her mom spent most days lying on the couch scrolling through her phone. Mara would scrub the plates while listening to her parents argue in the next room, praying she wouldn't hear the crash of something breaking. When her father slammed the door hard enough to shake the frames on the wall, Mara gathered Reese into her arms and whispered it would be okay, even though she never fully believed it herself. By middle school, Mara had learned to read the house like weather. Her father's footsteps told her whether he was in a good mood or one that made everyone small. Her mother's silence meant another bill was overdue. Reese's crying meant she needed help with a project due the next morning, even though she'd had weeks to prepare. Mara handled all of it with a tired smile because everyone expected her to. She wasn't asked, she was assumed. There was a day that stayed carved in her memory. She was 12, sitting at the kitchen table with a fever so strong her vision blurred. She tried to tell her mother she felt dizzy, that her stomach hurt. Her mother barely looked up as she shoved a stack of envelopes at her. "Just sort these. There are late fees again. You figure it out, you always do." Mara sat there shaking, sorting bills she didn't understand, doing her best to guess which ones might get shut off first. When she finally dropped her head onto her folded arms, exhausted, her mother scolded her for being dramatic. Another memory, Reese crying because she failed a math test. Their father yelled at her until she couldn't breathe, and Mara stepped between them, taking the blame, saying she forgot to help Reese study. She hadn't forgotten. Reese simply refused to try. But Mara knew if she didn't step in, the yelling would only get worse. Later that night, Reese thanked her, then casually mentioned that Mara was better at taking blame anyway. Again and again, Mara was the patch over every hole in the family boat, the glue for every broken piece. She didn't see it as manipulation back then. She thought it was love or duty or simply the role she was meant to play. But lying in that hospital bed weeks ago, remembering these moments one by one, she finally understood. They had never cared about her strength. They only cared about how much she could carry. Mara went back to her parents' house 2 days after she was discharged, still feeling weak but needing answers. The drive felt longer than usual, every mile filled with a tightness in her chest. She had practiced what she would say, how she would stay calm, how she would finally stand up for herself. But the moment she stepped through the door, it was like walking into the same old storm. Her mother, Gwen, was at the kitchen counter peeling potatoes. She didn't look up, didn't pause, didn't even acknowledge the hospital bracelet still on Mara's wrist. "Oh, you're here," she said flatly, as if Mara were an unexpected delivery. Her father, Douglas, sat in his usual recliner, the TV loud enough to shake the windows. He glanced at her once and then turned the volume higher. Reese, sprawled on the couch scrolling through her phone, smirked when she saw her. Mara took a breath. "I collapsed at work. The doctor said they called you. None of you came. And then, Reese, you sent me that photo." Reese didn't even sit up. "It was just a joke. You're always so sensitive." She rolled her eyes like Mara's pain was an inconvenience. Mara tried again, slow and steady. "I was alone in a hospital bed. I could barely stay awake. You could have checked on me." Gwen finally turned, face stiff. "Mara, the barbecue had been planned for weeks. You know how your father gets when plans change. We can't drop everything every time you get a little faint." "A little faint?" Mara's voice cracked before she could stop it. "I passed out at work." Douglas snorted. "People faint all the time. You act like you survived a car crash. Always looking for attention." The words hit her like a slap she didn't see coming. Mara looked to Reese, hoping for even a flicker of guilt, but Reese only gave her a sarcastic smile. "Seriously, Mara, you're being dramatic. You always take things too far." Mara felt heat rising behind her eyes, the same burning shame she used to feel as a kid when they brushed off her pain. "I'm not being dramatic. I needed you. I thought—" She stopped, her throat tightening. "I thought you cared." Gwen sighed loudly, as if exhausted by Mara's emotions. "We do care. But you're an adult. Adults handle their own problems. You can't expect us to jump every time something happens." "But I jump for you," Mara whispered. "I always have." Douglas pointed the remote at her like it was a weapon. "Maybe that's your problem. Nobody asked you to." Silence filled the room, heavy and familiar. The kind that told her she would never win here. She realized they weren't misunderstanding her. They simply didn't think she mattered enough to take seriously. Reese looked up again, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are you done with the guilt trip? Because this is getting boring." That was the moment Mara felt something in her heart quietly close. She grabbed her keys without another word. No yelling. No tears in front of them. She walked out feeling drained, small, and invisible, like they had erased her without even trying. But underneath all that hurt, something else was beginning to grow. A decision. Mara spent the next few days in her small apartment, trying to steady her breathing whenever the memory of that cold living room replayed in her mind. She told herself she would focus on healing, rest, maybe even start fresh. But something kept tugging at her, an uneasiness she couldn't explain. Every time she opened her bank app, the numbers didn't add up. She'd been working overtime for months, yet her savings barely moved. It didn't make sense. One quiet evening, she finally decided to dig through her old files. She pulled out a dusty shoebox from the top of her closet, the one where she kept papers from her early college years. She hadn't looked at it in years. Inside were old pay stubs, W-2s, and random bills. But then she found something she didn't recognize, a loan statement from when she was 19. She frowned, flipping the pages, trying to remember signing anything like it. The loan amount was huge, something no 19-year-old juggling part-time jobs could ever take on. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Maybe identity theft? But the name, address, and partial social security number all matched hers. Her stomach tightened as she scanned through the documents. Monthly payments had been automatically deducted from her account for years. Small amounts, disguised as other charges so she never questioned them. She sat frozen, her hands shaking slightly as she realized she had been paying this loan without knowing. She grabbed her phone and called the loan company. After a long hold, a representative confirmed it. Yes, the loan was taken out when she was 19. Yes, it was signed electronically, and yes, the cosigner was listed. Mara felt her heartbeat in her throat as he read the name. Gwen Ellington. Her mother. The room spun for a moment. She sat down slowly, clutching the edge of the table. Her own mother had taken out a massive loan using her name, and never told her. All those months when Gwen cried about bills, all those times Douglas shouted about money, all those nights Mara worked late, she thought she was helping her family survive. She never imagined she was paying off something they'd put on her shoulders. But the final blow came when she flipped to the last page and saw a familiar signature scribbled beside Gwen's. Reese. Her sister had witnessed it. She helped cover it. She was only 15 at the time, but she knew all along and let Mara drown under the weight of it for 8 years. Mara pressed her hands against her mouth, trying to swallow the shaking breath that escaped. Memories rushed back. Times when she asked why money was tight, moments when she wondered where her overtime checks kept disappearing to, days when Reese borrowed cash with a guilty look she couldn't explain. It all snapped into place now. The hospital abandonment had hurt deeply, but this was different. This was intentional, planned, hidden. They had taken from her future, her stability, her freedom, and watched her struggle without ever admitting what they'd done. It wasn't neglect. It was betrayal, and it ran much deeper than she ever imagined. Mara didn't know who to talk to at first. The truth about the loan sat on her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. She went to work the next morning with barely any sleep, her eyes puffy, her hands unsteady. She tried to hide it, but Felix Merriman noticed the moment she walked into the warehouse. Felix was in his early 50s, calm in a way that made everyone around him breathe easier. He wasn't loud, he wasn't nosy, but he paid attention. He had been supervising the warehouse for years, watching people come and go, and somehow he always knew when someone was falling apart quietly. He waited until her break, then found her sitting alone behind the loading dock, staring at the ground. "You look like you've been carrying a whole house on your back," he said gently. Mara tried to laugh it off. "Just tired." Felix sat beside her without pushing. Tired doesn't make someone look that hurt. Those words cracked something open. Before she knew it, she was telling him everything, collapsing at work, her family ignoring her, the cruel photo, and finally the loan she discovered buried under years of lies. She expected him to look confused or tell her she was overreacting, the way her family always had. Instead, Felix listened, eyes steady, jaw tightening with every detail. When she finished, he let out a slow breath. "Mara, that's not just dysfunction. That's emotional abuse." The word hit her hard. Abuse. She had never allowed herself to call it that. It felt too big, too heavy, too real. But something inside her recognized it instantly. Felix continued. "They didn't just take advantage of you. They built their lives on your effort. They trained you to believe your needs didn't matter, and they punished you whenever you tried to stand up for yourself. That isn't normal. And it isn't love." For the first time, someone said out loud what she had been afraid to even think. Mara swallowed. "I don't know what to do. I feel like if I confront them again, they'll twist it like they always do. Or make me feel crazy." "Then stop confronting them," Felix said simply. "Stop giving them the chance to spin it. You don't need their permission to walk away." She stared at him, unsure. "Walk away, how?" Felix leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You reclaim your life. You take back your money. You set boundaries they can't break. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't want to understand you. You build something that doesn't depend on them." Mara felt a strange, unfamiliar spark in her chest. Not hope exactly, but the first hint of strength. Felix wasn't giving her a revenge plan. He was giving her clarity. And choices. She nodded slowly, feeling the truth settle inside her. "I don't want to fight them anymore," she said. "I want out. I want to change everything." "Then start," Felix replied. "Start today." For the first time, Mara believed she could. Mara moved fast because she knew if she hesitated, she would fall back into old patterns. The very next week, she found a small apartment on the quieter side of town, a worn building with creaky floors and thin walls, but it was hers. When she signed the lease and picked up the keys, she stood in the empty living room for a long moment, letting the silence wrap around her. No shouting, no guilt, no expectations. Her life finally had space in it. The first thing she did was change her bank information. No more automatic transfers to her parents. No more sneaky deductions disguised as family emergencies. She sent her mother a short message, polite, calm, final. telling her she would no longer be contributing financially. She didn't explain. She didn't justify it. She didn't apologize. Within minutes, Gwen called her, her voice sharp with disbelief. Mara, this is not funny. Your father and I rely on that money. Mara kept her tone steady. I can't fund you anymore. Gwen switched to guilt instantly. After everything we've done for you? We raised you, we fed you, we took care of you. And this is how you repay us. Mara didn't respond. She simply ended the call. Next came Reese. Her sister showed up at her new apartment uninvited, knocking like she was trying to break the door down. When Mara opened it, Reese pushed inside, acting offended. So you're just abandoning us? Over what? A misunderstanding? Mara didn't let her spin the story. You knew about the loan. Reese froze for a second, then forced a shaky laugh. Oh my God, you're really going there? I was a kid. I didn't even understand what Mom was doing. But Mara could see the lie in her eyes, the same lie she had ignored for years. I'm done, Reese. Reese's face twisted. So that's it? You think you're better than us now? No, Mara said softly. I just think I deserve peace. Reese stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The next day, Douglas showed up at her workplace, waiting near the parking lot. His voice thundered the moment she stepped outside. You embarrassed your mother. You're hurting this family. You think you can just walk away? Mara stood tall, her hands steady this time. I'm not yours to control. Douglas moved closer, trying to intimidate her the way he always had, but something about her calmness threw him off. She didn't shrink. She didn't fold. She simply walked past him and got into her car. As the days passed, her family's tactics only became more desperate. Gwen left long voice messages sobbing about how Mara was breaking the family apart. Douglas sent cold warnings. Reese sent fake apologies, acting sweet and innocent, trying to worm her way back into Mara's life so she could regain access to money. But Mara didn't budge this time. Every boundary she set stayed in place. Every attempt they made bounced off the steady wall she was building. In her new apartment, Mara began to breathe differently, slow, full breaths that didn't shake. She cooked for herself. She slept without fear. She woke up without dread. For the first time in her life, she wasn't living for them. She was finally living for herself. Mara thought distancing herself would make them eventually quiet down, but it only made her family louder. They couldn't stand the idea of losing control, especially losing the daughter who had carried their weight for years. The first few calls she ignored, the messages she deleted. But one Monday morning, everything exploded in a way she didn't expect. She had just finished her shift when she heard shouting near the front entrance of the warehouse. At first, she thought it was customers arguing, but then she recognized the voices, sharp, familiar, and full of accusation. Her stomach tightened. Gwen was standing in the lobby, hair messy, eyes wild, pointing at anyone who would listen. Douglas paced behind her, fists clenched at his sides, anger radiating off him. Reese leaned against the wall with crossed arms, pretending she wasn't part of the chaos, but watching everything with narrowed eyes. There she is, Gwen yelled as soon as she spotted Mara. Mara, get over here right now. The lobby went silent. Employees turned to look. Mara froze only for a second, but she didn't rush toward them. She walked slowly, carefully, her heart pounding but her face steady. You need to leave, she said firmly. Douglas stepped forward. We are your family. You don't get to walk away. You owe us an explanation. People from the warehouse staff peeked around corners. A few customers backed away, sensing tension. Gwen threw her hands up dramatically. Look at what you're doing to us. You've abandoned your family for strangers. Is this how you treat the people who raised you? Reese snorted. Drama queen. Always trying to be the victim. Mara felt the old panic rising, the instinct to shrink and apologize, but she held her ground. I'm not doing this here. Leave. Douglas slammed his hand on the counter so hard the receptionist jumped. You think because you have a tiny apartment and a job, you can disrespect us? You will come home, Mara. We're not asking. The room buzzed with whispers. Something inside Mara clicked into place. She stepped back, pulled out her phone, and calmly pressed the record button. If you don't leave, she said, voice steady, I will call the police. Gwen gasped, offended. You would call the police on your own parents? Yes, Mara said simply. Before they could escalate further, Felix appeared from down the hall, hands in his pockets but eyes sharp. Is there a problem here? He asked the family. Douglas tried to bark back, but Felix cut him off with a firm tone no one dared to challenge. Sir, you cannot behave like this in a workplace. You need to leave the property now. Mara walked straight to HR, still shaking but determined. She showed them the recording. She wrote a full report. She filed another with local police, explaining the intimidation and showing proof of their behavior. And for the first time, someone in authority actually believed her. HR told her they would ensure her safety. They informed security to block her family from entering the property again. The police officer who took her report treated her with respect, taking her concerns seriously. When her parents tried to come back the next day, security turned them away. When they tried calling Felix to complain, he shut it down immediately. Their old tactics, shame, fear, pressure, crumbled in front of them. Mara didn't shout, beg, or argue. She simply protected herself. And her family realized, maybe for the first time, that they no longer had power over her. Mara spent the next few weeks quietly collecting every piece of evidence she could find. She went through old bank statements, scanned loan documents, and dug out emails and receipts she had saved over the years. Every automatic deduction, every forged signature, every bill she had unknowingly paid, they were all pieces of the puzzle. She compiled them carefully, organized them, and created a timeline of the deception, from the moment the loan was taken out in her name to the years of hidden payments that had drained her savings. She also documented every incident of manipulation, the times her parents had gaslighted her, and the ways Rhys had helped hide the loan. It was exhausting, both mentally and emotionally, but Mara worked methodically. She printed copies, took photographs of original documents, and even recorded her own notes detailing conversations she remembered. Each piece of evidence reinforced what she already knew. Her family had treated her like a bank and a servant, not a daughter or sister. Once everything was organized, Mara contacted the loan company. She calmly explained that the loan had been taken out without her knowledge and presented the documents proving fraud. They listened, confirmed her identity, and assured her they would start an investigation. Mara didn't stop there. She filed a formal report with local authorities, submitting copies of all evidence she had gathered. The police opened a case, and Mara watched as her carefully documented truth began to move through the proper channels. A few weeks later, the consequences began to hit. Douglas and Gwen received notices from the loan company, informing them of pending legal action for fraud. Their savings accounts were frozen temporarily while the investigation proceeded. Mara heard through official channels that they were facing serious financial and legal trouble, the same kind of stress they had forced her to bear for years. It wasn't about revenge for the sake of cruelty. It was about accountability. They had finally been made to answer for the choices that had stolen her peace and security. Rhys, too, faced consequences. Mara had included the evidence showing that Rhys, even as a teenager, had knowingly assisted in hiding the loan documents. When the scholarship committee received the documents Mara sent as part of her report, they revoked Rhys's scholarship. Mara felt no satisfaction in watching her sister struggle, only a stark understanding of cause and effect. Rhys had contributed to the deception, and now she had to face the reality of those choices. Through it all, Mara remained calm and composed. She didn't post about it, didn't tell friends or colleagues in detail. She let the authorities handle the situation. The proof spoke louder than any shouting or confrontation ever could. Her family's attempts to control and manipulate her crumbled under the weight of facts and evidence. For the first time, Mara felt the bitter weight of betrayal transform into a sense of justice. She wasn't acting out of anger or vengeance alone. She was reclaiming the years they had stolen from her. Each document filed, each report submitted, was a piece of her freedom. She had endured their lies, endured their cruelty, and now, quietly and efficiently, she had exposed the truth. Mara finally allowed herself to breathe. She had taken back what was rightfully hers. Not just her money, but her dignity, her peace, and her power. For once, the people who had hurt her the most were the ones left accountable. Mara arrived at the mediation office early, sitting in the neutral gray room with her hands folded in her lap. The sterile walls and muted lighting made it feel serious, official, and most importantly, safe. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, rehearsing every sentence, every pause, every expression. She wasn't here to argue or beg. She was here to speak her truth. Her parents and Rhys were already seated when she walked in. Gwen's eyes darted around nervously. Douglas sat stiffly, trying to appear in control, and Rhys leaned back with a smirk that Mara recognized from years past, a mask meant to show superiority. Mara took a slow breath and sat across from them, meeting each of their eyes calmly. The mediator began with introductions, but Mara barely registered the words. She had a list in her mind, not for the mediator, but for herself. It was time to say what had been bottled up for years. She started slowly, her voice even. I want to tell you all what it's been like for me growing up, and why I've taken the steps I have. She paused, letting the silence hang. I was the one who paid bills, cleaned up your mistakes, helped Reese with schoolwork, and took on responsibilities that were not mine. I did it because I thought it was love. I thought that's what family did. But now I see it wasn't love. It was control. It was using me until I had nothing left to give. Douglas shifted in his seat, opening his mouth to interrupt, but Mara held up her hand politely. Please let me finish. I collapsed at work, she continued, her voice steady. And you didn't come. Reese sent me a photo of all of you enjoying yourselves, calling it Family Day, without the chaos. That was a choice. That was not neglect. That was intentional. And the loan taken out in my name when I was 19, it wasn't a mistake either. You let me pay it for years without telling me. Reese, you helped hide it. Every one of you took from me, drained me, and discarded me when I was too tired to fight back. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but Mara didn't waver. She didn't yell, didn't slam her hands on the table. She didn't need theatrics. Her words carried the weight of truth. I am done being your caretaker, your ATM, or your punching bag, she said, her voice calm but firm. I am done being erased and made to feel invisible. You cannot take anything from me anymore. I am legally and emotionally free from this family. That is the final word. A heavy silence followed. Mara could feel the tension in the room, but she didn't look back. She rose slowly, collected her bag, and nodded politely to the mediator. Then she walked out. No yelling, no begging, no pleading from them could make her turn back. Every step out of that office felt lighter, as if the weight of years of manipulation and betrayal was finally lifting. Outside, the air felt fresh. Mara breathed in deeply, feeling the freedom she had earned. She was no longer bound by guilt, fear, or obligation. She had spoken her truth, set her boundaries, and walked away on her own terms. For the first time in her life, Mara felt fully, completely free. Mara stepped into her new life with a quiet determination she had never known. The apartment she had moved into months earlier was no longer just a space, it was her sanctuary. She painted the walls soft colors, added plants that she cared for daily, and arranged furniture in a way that made her feel calm and grounded. Every little detail reminded her that this was her life, her rules, her peace. Felix became a steady presence in her life. He didn't push, didn't judge. He simply offered guidance and support when she needed it. They would meet for coffee on weekends, talk about work, or take walks around the quiet streets near her apartment. He encouraged her to think about herself in ways she never had before, to acknowledge her feelings, to celebrate small victories. With him, Mara began to understand what it meant to have a chosen family, a support system built on trust, respect, and mutual care rather than obligation and manipulation. For the first time, she slept without anxiety creeping under her skin. She woke up without that familiar dread of being pulled back into a family that had never truly valued her. She spent her evenings learning new skills, cooking meals she enjoyed, and even enrolling in a few classes that had interested her for years but she had never pursued because she had been too busy caring for others. Every day, she felt herself growing stronger, more confident, more whole. Occasionally, her parents and Reese tried to reach her. They sent messages, made calls, even appeared at the apartment building's lobby, hoping for a confrontation or an apology. Mara didn't respond. She didn't need to. She realized that ignoring their attempts was more powerful than any argument she could ever have. She didn't owe them anything, not an explanation, not a reaction, not a moment of her peace. Her friends and coworkers noticed the change too. Mara walked with her head held high, her voice steady and warm. She laughed freely, no longer weighed down by fear or guilt. She even reconnected with people she had drifted away from, those who treated her with respect and kindness, people who reminded her what genuine relationships felt like. Months passed and Mara's life blossomed. She found a promotion at work, giving her financial stability she had never dreamed of. She traveled on weekends, explored parts of the country she had always wanted to see, and started saving for her future without any hidden debts or manipulations hanging over her. Every achievement was a quiet victory over the years of neglect and betrayal she had endured. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the sun set, Felix joined her with 2 mugs of tea. Mara leaned back, letting the cool air brush against her face, and smiled. She realized the final act of revenge had never been about lawsuits, reports, or exposure. It had been about living fully, authentically, and well without them. And for the first time, Mara felt completely free. She had built a life of peace and strength they could never take from her. She was no longer their burden, their tool, or their victim. She was herself, strong, independent, and whole. And that was the victory she had always deserved. Do you think Mara made the right choice by cutting ties with her family, or should she have tried to fix things with them? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to hear your opinion. And if you love stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.